Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Jonathan Swarper. I chair the corporate group here at Hanson Bridgett. For those of you who have not been with us before, Hanson Bridgett is a law firm. And one of the things, we do lots of things, but one of the things we focus on are sustainable companies, nonprofit corporations, and impact investing. So what you do is really in our sweet spot. I'm really proud to say that Hanson Bridgett is a B Corp. We're actually not a corporation at all, but I know you all are aware of what B Corps are. And we were actually a founding B Corp. We were one of the first 15. We were the first law firm to become a B Corp. And I want to say I'm very proud to say that. You probably haven't heard that from many lawyers. Oh, I just got my Be the Change pin. The other thing we did here at Hanson Bridgett was I chaired the legal working group that actually wrote a new law called the Benefit Corporation Law, which is the first legal corporate form, for-profit corporate form, to combine profit and social and environmental performance. There are now 4,500 of these benefit corporations in 34 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. There's about 1,500, I think, B Corps, certified B Corps. But now the benefit corporation movement is actually beginning to overtake it, which is what we want, because we want people to build into their legal structure actually a requirement to have social and environmental performance. On sort of the food and agriculture side, Hanson Bridgett has had a 50-year history with this. We represent many different sustainable kinds of agriculture and food and beverage companies. I personally represented catfish farmers in Louisiana, tomato growers in the Central Valley, and almond growers, and many different kinds of restaurants. So what you're doing is really in our sweet spot. I just wanted to say welcome. We're so glad you're here, and enjoy the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Lara Dickinson. I'm with OSC2, and I'm kind of in awe, not just of these guys and getting to be able to be with three people who radically are changing the food system, but there's some really amazing people in the audience. So I have some wine here if I, keep me going. Let's see. So we're here tonight, and we're going to talk about regenerative agriculture. But as a in the broader context of how leaders are thinking about this, we're not here to talk about and belabor science as much as how can we get things done and how can leaders lead and create a better food system. And there's some great people in the room that we want to make sure to give ample time for questions and interaction at the end of this. I want to start with also thanking all these great people who helped us and our amazing partners and supporters, Gary and Mindy with New Resource Bank, who said, heck yeah, you guys need to do this event and lots more of them, and so Kath and Lindsay, and Hanson Bridgett, thank you, Jonathan, and of course all these amazing companies that are here with us. So thanks for being here. I'm going to share, let's see, I got my clicker, a little bit about OSC2. But first I want to talk about, first I'm going to introduce these guys, because most of you know them, but just to kind of tell you who they are, and then we're going to talk a little bit about OSC and then show you an amazing clip. So I want to introduce you first. Do you guys know John Roulac? This is John here, the CEO of Nutiva. He founded it in 1999. I'm reading just because I want to make sure I get it right. And he founded it to create a better food system and is a vocal challenger, as many of you know, of the industrial food system, and a strong advocate for hemp, agriculture, GMO labeling, organic farming. He was really the first person who told me about regenerative agriculture 3 years ago, and all of us were like, he talking about? So truly on the forefront. And also David Bronner, so honored to have you here up from Southern California. He's the Cosmic Engagement Officer. I like that. I think we all need to change what that stands for, CEO. Dr. Bronner is the top-selling brand of natural soaps in North America and a producer of a lot of other body care and food products. He's the grandson, you guys didn't know, of the founder, Emmanuel Bronner, and a fifth-generation soap maker. And under David and his brother Michael's leadership, the brand has grown from 4 million to just about 100 million in the last 16, 17 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And John Foraker. John is President and former CEO of Annie's and a leading authority in the organic and natural products industry. With over 25 years in business and experience and a sharp focus on sustainability and social responsibility. His vision is for growing Annie's and to be relied on as a transparent leadership and an overarching commitment to creativity, innovation, and honesty. And we're so honored as well to see you continue to be influencing things positively from within Bigger Food and really driving change. So thanks all of you guys for being here. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about why we're here, a little bit more. I think, let's see, where do I go from here? Am I in the right place, Michael? And by the way, this is Michael. He is an awesome OSC, a long time, 3 years we've been working together, and he heads up special projects, partnerships, and a lot of other stuff at OSC. So OSC, I think most of you know who we are, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. It's an awesome, awesome group of CEOs and leaders who have agreed to come together on a regular basis, almost monthly, and basically work on how do we build more regenerative business models in agricultural systems. So some people are really committed to the long term for our food system. These are some of the ways we work together. Not only do we work on improving each other's businesses, but we have a lot of outward projects, and so we're going to talk about that within the context of regenerative agriculture. One of the first things we did when we founded OSC 4 years ago was say we got to do something about packaging. We're still doing something about packaging, but we've made a lot of progress because it's an Achilles heel of the industry when you've got all this incredibly ethical product in packaging that goes to landfill. And it truly bothers a lot of folks in the industry. So we've been working hard on that and made quite a bit of progress on compostable and more high bio-based. And then the second thing, a couple other things we do is we have OSC University, which is a great place to just get great Fortune 500 level training in marketing, Excel spreadsheets, mindful leadership for food companies. And then the final thing is these sub-department groups. So we have many marketing groups. We're launching a finance group. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a climate collaborative. So this is the groups that are involved in the compostable packaging collaborative. That's how we kind of expand our footprint beyond the core CEOs. We invite anyone. And so a lot of you in the room, and I get a lot of questions, well, how do I get involved with OSC? Hello?
Thanks.
All right. Sorry, yeah. So how do I get involved with OSC? So you can, as a CEO, get involved as in OSC in our core membership group, and happy to talk about that, but also through our collaboratives. Through the Packaging Collaborative, we have a much broader group, and through the Climate Collaborative, which we are launching in partnership with SFTA and New Hope. So I'm going to talk about this for a few minutes because that's really inspired why we're here today. The Climate Collaborative was something about a year ago. We had an OSC meeting, and at the end of it, I had a call from one of the members who is the founding partner at Happy Family, Jessica Rolfe, and she said, Lara, are you feeling this? Are you feeling like we just talked about climate? And I just got off the phone, I've been thinking about it. But, like, are you really feeling it? There are forest fires outside my house in Idaho right now. And I was standing on Treasure Island about to go into a meeting, and I looked around and I thought, God, it hasn't really rained in 3 years here either. And, like, what are we really doing? Like, I think we've all had these moments where it hits you, but what are we really doing? And so we started to think about it, and we worked on it. We said, how could we scale this like we're doing with packaging for the food industry in a way that actually takes meaningful steps, and how do we think about that? And so we've been working on this for about a year, and one of the conversations we had was with Paul Hawken, and he really kind of framed this up well. He's an advisor to us now. In terms of food is a huge source of problem, and it's also one of the biggest potential solutions. And that's pretty darn inspiring when you think about it the right way, when we start to ask, what are we doing about it? Not individually, but also collectively. And there's a lot of stats out there that we actually agree now that we need to do something. And that also companies, most people agree, of course, that companies have got to do something. And we've also pulled a lot of companies. So we asked 100 companies, a lot of them in the room, some of the most foremost companies in the food industry. What do you think about climate change and what should we do about it? Companies like Stonyfield, Patagonia, Numi, Annie's, and Nutiva. Bronners, and they all filled these forms out, and guess what? They all said, yeah, I've actually seen the impact of this in my supply chain, and I think we need to start acting quickly. We don't have much time, and I think our industry can do more. Yet, our response hasn't really matched the scale of the threat, and so then we asked, well, why hasn't that happened? And no surprise, well, we have other business priorities, right? So that's one piece. The other, which is surprising because these companies are arguably leaders and probably on the forefront of thinking about what to do. And honestly, most of them said, we don't know exactly what to do first. We don't know what to do first. And this was a vast majority of them. And so what we started to work on, and this was in partnership very hard with amazing team, including New Hope, Nancy Hirschberg, who's just a super expert on climate, and SFTA, the Sustainable Food Trade Association. And we started to work on how do we come up with a solution. And it's actually not necessarily about science as much as behavioral change. So we've been working a lot on how do we think about behavior and changing that. And first is to engage decision makers to rise to the challenge of making it a priority, which is why we have actually CEOs talking to each other and to decision makers and influencers in the industry. Because once decision makers start to make decisions, then businesses make decisions. And then second is we need to create a meaningful path to action. And so the Climate Collaborative is about working to collaboratively to catalyze action. And it's about amplifying the voice of business and sound policy to not, I want to make this clear, it's not to contain climate, it's to reverse climate change. And we can go into a lot of science, but it hit me really hard when I was talking with Paul Hawken. I think you have all heard 2 degrees is basically BS. You know, that's like we're, in 30 years, and I've got a 1-year-old, so it really hit me. In 30 years, we're walking around. We're biologically here, but it's not much of a life, let me tell you that. And that hit me, and I think it hits a lot of people when you really let it sink in. And so it's actually about reversing climate change, and that's not about one person saying, I'm gonna go and improve my packaging footprint. It's actually, it actually requires us to shift the way we think and work. And so the Climate Collaborative is about 3 things: inspiration, by engaging leaders, commitment, making bold commitments, and I'm going to share those commitments with you, and action, which is creating and removing barriers, so creating a path to action for food companies and making it easy. These are the commitment areas, and this is where we're going to land on. And you'll see that of these 9 commitment areas, agriculture is one of the first. And that's why we're here today, is to talk about how do we think, and it also is arguably one of the ones that we need to do a better job of defining. Because regenerative agriculture, there's a lot of talk about that, but we still don't exactly know what to do. And so that's one that we need to take some real time to define within the Climate Collaborative. And so in terms of goals, we have, the goals are within the first year. We're actually making great progress. We have major commitments from everyone from Whole Foods to Infra to NCG, and a lot of great companies like Bronner's and Organic Valley stepping up and Stonyfield to jump on board and help basically fund this initiative. But it's to get 100 companies to make commitments in the first year and 1,000 to make 3,000 commitments in 3 years. And that's still not enough, but what that does is actually consumers look to us, right? So then we start to really create sea change with that. So from there, I'm going to talk about, I want to kind of cue this up in agriculture and regenerative agriculture for us by a film that I think is pretty amazing and summarizes a lot in a short period of time. I'm going to ask John, you to kind of, as the person who really took it on to help executive produce this film, to explain why we're seeing it, and then we're going to hear from you guys.
Good. Is this working? You guys hear me? Yeah. So first off, thanks for coming tonight, and for Laura and Michael to organize this. So we're going to see just the intro to this film called Kiss the Ground. And about 3 years ago, when I started learning more about the role of agriculture and climate change and seeing the need to educate people, I thought, why not create a major motion picture and documentary format? So met these filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca in Ojai, And so the film is moving forward, probably a year away before you'll see it in a big screen. But we're pretty excited about it, and I'm, as Laura said, I'm serving as an executive producer along with several other folks, and David Bronner is helping on it, and so it's let's go ahead and roll and see. I hope you guys enjoy it.
"10,000 years ago, in the fertile soil near the rivers of the ancient world, humanity discovered agriculture, and our civilization was born. Agriculture transformed humans from nomadic hunter-gatherers into the first species that could control their food supply. It was the reason we built cities and organized societies. In many ways, it's the reason why we exist as we do today. Agriculture fueled the growth of our species as we learned new and improved farming techniques. But today, agriculture has evolved into something very different. Instead of learning from nature, we are fighting against it.
We're losing more topsoil every year today than we ever did in the Great Depression.
We're depleting the soil 18 to 80 times faster than it's built up naturally. If we farm all of it, it's gone.
For us to really go forward, we need to take a really deep understanding of soils, and particularly the biology that live within the soil, because without them, we're gone. Every civilization that's destroyed its soils has destroyed itself.
The modern industrial farming system is motivated not by what's best for the people or what's best for the land. It's what's best for the bottom line.
The mainstream production agriculture practices have focused on bulk and voluminous production.
There's no longer an agrarian culture or connection to our food. We live in cities, and food is grown in the country. We have no relationship to that. We're completely disconnected from what that system looks like.
Many nutritionists telling us that the food we're consuming today has just 20% of the nutrition found in the food consumed by our grandparents when they were children. So we lost 80% in 3 generations.
Vast fields of monocrops are cultivated with heavy use of fossil fuel, pesticides, and fertilizers.
The tillage that we do, the pesticides, the inorganic fertilizers, all of that damage turns that soil into dirt.
Ever since we started what I call the chemical experiment in agriculture, there's been a global increase in the amount of chemicals. So every year we put on more for less and less response, and that is literally the definition of unsustainable.
I really had to start focusing, how can I make this farm and ranch get these soils to produce a crop without all these inputs? I started to be a studier of soil ecosystems. I actually went back and I read Thomas Jefferson's old journals because I was trying to figure out how did they do this previous to the use of all these synthetics. Then I had a good friend of mine who was no-tilling. He said, Gabe, in your dry environment, you need to go no-till in order to save moisture and save time. I couldn't afford to just go out and buy no-till equipment, so I sold all my tillage equipment, and we've been 100% zero-till ever since. This is a no-till drill. No-till drills are available everywhere in the world. This will help you grow topsoil. Any type of tillage equipment will destroy topsoil. This is your firming wheel. This holds this residue so the disc here can cut it. Just making a small slit. The seed travels down at a specific rate per acre. This comes around, moves a small amount of soil right over that seed. We're keeping all this armor on the soil surface in order to protect the soil from wind erosion, water erosion, so we can grow crops on much less moisture with this type of a system. In the county I'm located, Burleigh County, North Dakota, 70% is now no-till. One of the things that we're seeing right now in California and elsewhere is the extreme drought that's going on. You see a lot of bare soils that are being tilled. That's the worst thing we can do for soil. Rain falls on this, it's going to go right into the soil. Rain falls on bare soil, it's going to run off, and then it's going to evaporate very quickly. So I'm taking you to a field here that is a multi-species cover crop. This is what we'll graze cattle on during the winter. The purpose of a cover crop is to enhance the life and the function of the soil. There's 19 different species in this mix here. All of those species serve a specific role. Sorghum Sudan grass, that has a very high nutrient quality for the cattle. Here I have hairy vetch, a biennial legume, 25 to 30% crude protein. Soybeans, another legume, that's going to fix nitrogen. Red clover, another legume. Sunflowers in here, they break up compaction layers. A little bit of flax in here, it helps proliferate the mycorrhizal fungi. Buckwheat, that scavenges phosphorus, an excellent habitat for the pollinator species. We have all these different species more or less mimicking what a native prairie would do. We're feeding the soil biology what it would take a conventional farmer 19 years to do. I'm doing it in 1 year. People might ask, how do you get any money from this thing? Well, our livestock will graze this during the winter, converting this biomass into dollars for us, yet we've still benefited the soil. I have not found a commodity crop that will generate as many dollars for me as I can get grazing a cover crop. So what we have here are two of our egg mobiles. Approximately 3 days after the cattle move through an area and graze, we'll bring the laying hens in. They truly are free range. They can go wherever they want. Birds were always nature's scavengers. They sanitize the soil more or less of any pest insects, fly larvae, etc. They do a great job of that. But this is what chickens were evolved to do. They also generate considerable income for us in that we sell pastured eggs from them. If you look over here, we have my neighbor's land that has been chemical fallowed. It has had nothing growing on it for over a year, except for the few Roundup-resistant weeds that are on here. It's an ecological desert. Then you look over at our paddocks. You have a diversity of different plant species. You have insects, you have wildlife, plus the livestock grazing on it. We're capturing sunlight from early in the spring till late in the fall, converting that sunlight into liquid carbon to drive and fuel the system. There you have soil. Over on this side you have dirt. Where do you want your food to come from? Which model do you want your food to be produced from? The answer is pretty simple to me.
No, it's great. I haven't seen that particular cut. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, John, can you kick off by, kind of summarizing a little bit more about the film and also defining regenerative agriculture for us? Clearly this hit you a few years ago, and I'd like to kind of understand why you embrace this.
Good. Just a little on the personal level. I mean, I've been an advocate for organic agriculture and permaculture and for the last 25 30 years. But about 3 years ago, I heard a presentation on on regenerative agriculture and climate change, and it really hit me about like, wow, our whole organic food movement and promoting the benefits of organic farming isn't really talking about climate change. And when I learned that the majority of greenhouse gas emissions comes from agriculture, not from Chevron, Exxon, the transportation industry, but you don't hear that from the climate movement and the NGOs or the government. So that really like, well, we got to get the word out, and so that's kind of where the idea started, and started writing some articles in EcoWatch, and getting people, like Laura and others to, and David and Dr. Bronner's has really picked up the ball in this, and is doing all sorts of things. He was actually out at Gabe Brown's. He's getting the 101 and all these things, and really learn a lot about it, and talking to people about changing our diet. So that was kind of the idea, and then the film came from there to educate. But we have a very short window. We can't just do business as usual for the next few decades. It's a short window, and I talk a lot about the connection between oceans and soils, because it's a whole system. It's not like we have soils and they operate up by themselves. And a lot of the carbon is going up in the ocean, going up in the atmosphere, and it's falling down into the oceans. And we all know if you put too much carbon in the oceans, the oceans start to become acidic. And when they become acidic, and they've increased it by about 0.1% in the last 50 years, that may not seem like a lot, but it's like 30% more acidity. And then the plankton can't live in that kind of environment, so we're losing plankton, and that's our major source of oxygen. So if you're interested in breathing, you like oxygen, I suggest you get involved in this campaign and change your diet, and never buy industrial meat anymore. That's the number one thing. Don't buy industrial meat, and eat less meat. And so regenerative agriculture basically refers to the process using photosynthesis and agricultural practices that sequester carbon into the soil and can reverse climate change. That's basically it. And there's a lot of scientists and experts can tell you more about that.
You've got a couple more slides, right? One?
Yeah. So the idea is there's these three basic carbon sinks. There's the atmosphere, and that's where a lot we all talk about. There's we're 400 parts per million. We're trying to get to 350 or less, and we're on the way increasing. And if we made let's say Bill McKibben, the founder of $350.org, let's say the benevolent dictator for the entire world, and he could triple solar and Tesla sold and green energy and all that overnight, and just every year would just go faster, like amazing all over. Just doing that and not dealing with the soils, we're not gonna make it as a species, or most species on this planet. So we have to figure out, what are we going to do with all this carbon? That's the basic question. And there's no more, no less carbon. And the good news is we have a solution. We have an app for that, as I like to say, and that's regenerative agriculture. We can put it into the humosphere, not the atmosphere. We know more about what's in space than we do what's under our feet. So the solution is literally under our feet. And that's just a quote from one of the top scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So you guys can probably see it there instead of reading it. So we got to take care of that. To me, ocean acidification, the health of the ocean, is the number one environmental issue on the planet. We're an ocean planet, not a land planet. We don't take care of the ocean. And the way we take care of the oceans, the number one way right now, besides reducing plastics and all those things and overfishing, but we have to put the carbon back into the soil. And one last thing I'll say is there's also a big interest now to actually become ocean farmers. Instead of fishing the oceans, we can farm the oceans and take all that excess carbon that's in the ocean through regenerative practices such as kelp and other things. And there's a group called Green Wave and I did a presentation with them in Berkeley recently. So that's got some great potential. That just shows you algae bloom that was like a year and a half ago because of this ocean health.
Great.
I could go on, but I think I'll cut it there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So David, you've made a commitment to supporting this film and regenerative agriculture, and would love to hear why? What kind of lit you up and got you compelled to do this, and how, as an industry, can we be more coordinated towards action from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, kind of like John. I mean, John's an early adopter of a lot of very kind of progressive environmental ideas. He was kind of first on one of the early composters, early on hemp. And, he, along with a lot of other people on our team, like Garo and who's sitting in the back here, and Ryan Zinn, who they manage our fair trade organic farmer projects around the world. We have our own sister companies in Sri Lanka and Ghana, producing coconut and palm oil in a really next level organic regenerative fashion. We have massive compost projects, and mostly as far as improving soil health and fertility and yields in organic ways, so that we're producing food and materials that are sustainable and not poisoning the planet, poisoning our bodies. But really didn't understand the climate implications of organic farming until basically last year. I went to Soil Not Oil, which John has helped produce, and it's here in Richmond. I didn't go to the burn. I had to skip it and move my daughter into college. And went to the Soil Not Oil and finally got the download. Like, I'd heard, Ryan, they've been nattering about it. I was like, oh, okay, now I get it, and basically that up to a third of excess atmospheric carbon is from historically mismanaged agricultural soil, farm and rangelands being over-tilled, overgrazed, and then particularly with the industrial model, like just slammed with synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. And this disrupts the soil biota, and that soil is a living, miraculous membrane, and we're treating it like dirt that just holds up plants, and we just bring our crops to harvest with chemicals. And we're just systematically destroying this living soil biota, all this carbon locked up in the soil biota, and then that soil biota, the soil process, just like the basics of photosynthesis, it's like so miraculous, and so many people, including myself, really don't have my head around it, or didn't, that photosynthesis, you're just taking carbon from air, and through photosynthesis, plants are converting it into carbohydrates. It makes roots, plant shoots, leaves. Animals eat the plants, and we eat the animals and the plants. So all this carbon, all this life is carbon from the atmosphere, from the air. And up to 20 to 40% of that carbon is being exudated through the roots into the soil in a symbiotic exchange with the microbiota that are providing trace nutrients to the plants. And in this cycle, humus is formed, recalcitrant carbon, and this is how these really rich topsoils form over time. And in the richest topsoils, with these large herds of ruminants, of buffalo and where we got wildebeests and zebras and all these ruminants basically grazing grasslands, being kind of bunched up by predator pressure, moved through without overgrazing the grass. That relationship with the grasslands is in these perennial grasses with these deep roots. This is what really drives humus formation. So like basically what we've done with the modern industrial agriculture is we've taken the animals off the farms, we put them in cages, and now we're growing all these GMO industrial monocultures of corn and soy, feeding them, especially to ruminants who aren't involved to eat them. It's totally inefficient conversion of plant protein and energy into animal protein energy. Something like you're getting like 4% conversion of that soy and corn into animal protein and carbohydrate. So this is a completely inefficient model. And if you take those ruminants, put them back on the land in a mixed organic livestock system where you're growing pasture and you're building up the fertility and you're grazing that grass, and then you put in your crops after you're like, say, a 4-year or whatever your rotation cycle is, you can constantly build the fertility of that soil on that farm without importing off-farm fertility, especially synthetic nitrogen. Synthetic nitrogen is horrible. The Haber-Bosch process that makes synthetic nitrogen takes up something like 4% of the world's energy is used just to make the nitrogen. And then that nitrogen and the runoffs creating all these dead zones in the ocean, but it's also systematically disrupting the soil biota. So anyways, the point is that with regenerative agriculture, like if we at global scale we adopt regenerative agricultural methods, which is you cover crop, you don't leave soil bare, you have a rich rotation, you're not using a lot of chemicals. Like if you're with livestock, they're being raised correct, they're not overgrazed, they're being managed like as if they're in the wild. And just basically much better meat. These methods, these organic regenerative methods, and compost, use of compost, can within 5 to 10 years regenerate soil, really like bring them back to life and start to sequester huge amounts of carbon and start to really mitigate climate change, like really start to draw down that excess carbon. Like soil is the largest land sink of carbon, way more than reforestation or restoring wetlands. I mean, soil is the solution. That is where we can put this excess carbon. As John says, if overnight we decarbonize the economy, we still are 100 parts per million past the point of no return. In 2050, we have to draw down the excess carbon, and regenerative agriculture is the major strategy we have.
Thanks, David. So, John, how do Annie's and General Mills think about regenerative agriculture within their supply chain and building that in? And also, can you tell us about this amazing product and
Sure.
why you decided to move forward on this?
Yeah. So,
you guys see this epic bar?
An epic bar. So, what's interesting about this panel and being here is it's a collision of multiple worlds for big impact. And so Annie's first organic products were introduced in 1998, and we did that because we had a mission that was focused on doing better for the world and mitigating the proliferation of toxic pesticides and farming more holistically and all that. And we were kind of honestly like in our own world, just growing that year after year after year. And then we were acquired by General Mills 2 years ago. About 6 months before that, I actually had lunch with this guy, and we were at Gather in Berkeley. He was all fired up. Like you could be surprised that he would be all fired up. He's all, you guys care about climate, right? And I'm all, yeah, we've had this really big focus program on it, and we've been focused on global warming and climate change and carbon reduction and taking out our supply chain, all that stuff. He goes, the biggest thing you could do is in the soil, and I'm like, let's talk about it. And so he gave me this definition of regenerative agriculture. I'm like, whoa, like we're totally doing a lot of that right now. We could do a lot more. And then we were acquired by General Mills. In January of this year, we bought Epic. And Epic is a very cool company based in Austin, Texas that is sourcing meat that's coming from more holistic operations and places that are very much dialed into that philosophy. And so there was this convergence of like, wow, we have a big commitment to organic. We know a lot about organic farming and transitioning organic acreage, and we know what that does for sustainable farm economies and for reduced pollution and all those things. And we're learning about the potential benefits of ruminants, grazing, and obviously rotating crops, which is a big part of organic. Like, can we pull that all together? And now with the power of General Mills, this a $16 billion company, one of the biggest food companies in the world, like, can we actually bring that all together for big impact? And the answer is we can. And honestly, what's kept me energized about staying with Annie's since the acquisition was two things really. One is I want to make sure the brand that I spent almost my whole life working on was preserved and culture's right. Okay, that was very selfish. But the second thing was I think that the solutions that these guys are talking about, we can have all the great ideas in the world, but if we can't do it at scale globally, we'll never win. And to me, the way you have to do that is you have to figure out how do you create the right incentives, knowledge, and capabilities to have the largest farming operations in scale in the world do it. And so that to me is an incredible promise. Like we have some people here from Annie's, but like person who does organic sourcing for all of General Mills, person who does sustainability for Annie's, the guy who, I'm not going to out you, Dave, but the guy who's responsible for everything that General Mills buys in commodities in the U.S. and the world. So if you have any question about, nobody tackle him. But if you have any question about whether the big companies, and I'm not saying just General Mills, I guarantee you Kellogg's thinking about the same things, Campbell's thinking about the same things. If you have any question about whether we're on these things, you shouldn't have that question. Mm-hmm. Because we all know that the system we're in is not sustainable. And despite all the things that people can criticize big companies for, myself included, I was one of them, and still am very highly critical of some things big companies do. I do believe that the solution lies in scaling the things we're talking about. So to me, that's the potential and opportunity. And we're not perfect, and it's going to be hard, and we have to make it work for farmers and all that stuff. But I think that's the promise. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
Glad you're here, Dave. Yeah, he'll be here afterwards. So John Roulac, back to you. How do you see the different farming solutions? And actually, I want to take a step back. You guys probably all know this better than me, but when I have a question where I'm trying to like muddle through, how do we think about different sustainable pieces? I call Shauna knows Catherine DeMatteo, who ran the Organics Trade Association for a number of years. And I'm like, well, there's organic, there's biodynamic, there's integrated pests, there's regenerative ag. Like, how do we think about all these? And so, and I think like where I listen and hear is like there's room for everything. Basically, there are different systems, and regenerative agriculture addresses one system, which is soil. Integrated pest management addresses another system. Organics addresses more than one system. Elizabeth is with the Demeter over here, and with biodynamic, we might ask her some questions a little bit about how they think about it. But so there's different ways to think about this. And within regenerative agriculture, which is very clearly focused on soil, which we believe has the biggest impact on climate, how is it scalable, number one? I mean, one of the things that we've seen, it's been hopeful but also discouraging, is organics. Farmers have been slow to pick up on it. How do we scale regenerative, and is there more hope there?
Yeah, I mean, all the different things you mentioned, they're all, the tenet is like holistic thinking, and not just thinking of like the, industrial agriculture. They look at soil as just a medium to put chemicals in, to put the fertilizer, where it's more of a systems perspective, whether you're talking about regenerative agriculture. I mean, I think the difference between regenerative agriculture and organic is, you can't use this, you can't do this, you can't do this. But organic farmers, do you think organic farmers, most of them improve? Do you think they're increasing the organic matter in their soil every year? Not all of them are. Are they increasing, the soil activity? Not necessarily. Not all of them are. And like Gabe Brown, he's not certified organic. He may sometimes, some of the farmers, if you take all the tools out of the toolbox, as big a purist as I am for organic, if you take all the toolbox right away, they're not going to sign up for it. And so, but he's increased the organic matter, from 3% to 6 or 7 or something like that?
0.5% to 7%.
0.5% to 7. That's phenomenal.
15 years.
Yeah. So the idea is to regenerate. We can regenerate instead of sustainable agriculture is like just sustain it, but we actually need to regenerate. So I think that's there. In terms of scale, there's people in Australia that have 100,000 acres, 500,000 acres, rangeland. So it can be done at scale. Part of the challenge is economics in terms of acquiring the land. We were having a conversation earlier about, I think there's a need for new investment vehicle to kind of marry, investment opportunity, ecological restoration and land and increasing the supply. Because right now there's not enough supply of organic material, regenerative products. So that's an issue, but it definitely can be scaled, and more people are starting to work on that. In fact, it's not a question as can we do it? It's a question is when we'll do it and to what degree.
Mm-hmm. Great. David Bronner, tell us the concept of regeneratarian came up in the film, and I've heard you say it. Can you talk about what that means, and also how we compel the industry towards more coordinated work together?
Yeah, absolutely. But let's just jump in on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like a couple of the barriers too. I think to scaling right now is the financing. Like the banks and financing are a huge problem. Like they're not willing. They don't understand organic agriculture. They understand. Okay, you do the same old. You buy these chemicals, finance. You buy these chemicals, whatever. And next year you pay us back. Like okay, I want to take 3 years and do this crazy organic thing. Like bankers don't get it, and so there's this real problem of financing, and that needs to be addressed and is being addressed. Also, the median age of farmer right now is like 65 or some crazy thing, and they're like, not a lot of them are like, yeah, okay, we get it, but the system's going to get me through, and they're not ready to like take on some huge deal, like an organic conversion. But I think as this young generation's coming up, and there's going to be the most massive, I guess, land transfer like in this country coming up in the next decade or so, that there's like going to be a lot of kind of young energy, hopefully willing to take on the challenge, and then the the financing piece, also the transitional, like it's a 3-year transition with no basically your soil. As soon as you take away the chemicals, like the soil's dead. And it's not producing. You have very low yields. You have no ability to communicate to the consumer that you're doing that. Like you have to wait 3 years to make the organic claim. So it's like a big, barrier. So I think they're working on doing some kind of transitional claim that you're doing, so you can just help this transition from the unsustainable industrial to the regenerative organic. And then John said, IPM. I mean, it's kind of a blend of biodynamics and IPM. Like biodynamics, kind of like the top. We're really regenerative. It's such a strict standard, and it's great, and it's kind of the gold, definitely the gold standard. But then, making allowance for like integrated pest management. Like okay, you can use chemicals in a regenerative scheme and a little bit, here and there, like Gabe. And that all is kind of within the regenerative. I mean, we're committed to organic. We're gonna never ever not veer from it, but we feel like there is room in the regenerative tent for people like Gabe, who's clearly rocking it. And he wants to get rid of herbicide, but he's still using a little bit in his system. But yeah, so regenitarian. So it's a term. I coined the term. Like basically, omnivore, vegetarian, vegan. We all need to be like realize that we're all farmers. Like our plate is a farm, fork is a pitchfork, or knife is a butchering knife. What does our farm look like? Take responsibility for what our farm looks like, and especially with animals. I mean, animal impact is like. It's like fire, and Alan Savory is a really good guy to really kind of get this download on, like animal impact, like unmanaged, out of control. It's just a disaster on the planet. But if you really control animal impact in an integrated farming system, it can be really beneficial as far as the soil fertility and fertility in a farm and building soil. So it's it's all about kind of a correct management and relationship. And understanding the rules, like ruminants are, have a key role to play in a kind of pasture crop system. Like historically, monogastric chickens and pigs are more like kind of like converting all this inedible food waste into edible. You had a few chickens and a few pigs on every farm, and it just kind of ate all the stuff that you couldn't eat, and then it was basically adding to the food supply. But now we eat way too much pig and chicken and cattle, and so now we're basically feeding primary food crops for people to animals. And that's not the way we should do it. So we need to way lower our consumption and then move to a regenerative sources of animal protein. Yeah. So that's like basically, and then on the vegan side to really, and I'm vegan, I've been vegan for 20 years and will be vegan till the day I die. Like on the vegan side to really understand that like buying conventional soy and conventional product, like that chemical intensive, pesticide intensive model is a disaster on non-target wildlife. The scale of death that attends industrial models of agriculture, like all the synthetic fertilizer that's running off and creating huge dead zones in the sea, like all the pollinators and birds and being hit by the neonicotinoids, some of which are banned in Europe because they're the primary culprit for colony collapse disorder. Like just really understanding the importance and like the vegan prerogative to eat from regenerative organic farms. And then also like that it's like counterproductive to be firing at the next level regenerative farms that are using and farming with livestock appropriately, and then vice versa, kind of obsessing over what the vegans are doing. Like we're like 1% of the country. We need to be focused on the CAFO factory farm machine that's eating us for lunch and like be in solidarity, and we can have a final battle of vegan versus permaculture or whatever in 100 years. But like for now, but in the meantime, we need to like unite and come together. And and the animal welfare movement is on fire right now. The regenerative ag movements are on fire, and they both are totally agreed on factory farms are a disaster, and both are focused from different angles on getting rid of washing factory farms off the face of the planet. And there's like we just need to really formalize that. And there's another documentary coming out based on Jonathan Ford's book, Eating Animals. And Eating Animals is really amazing. And I'm actually going to have dinner with him next week with some philanthropists driving that. So that and Kiss the Ground are going to be a really great kind of pair, like kind of like 1-2 punch, one from the animal welfare and one from the regenerative ag side. on the necessity that to move to a regenerative ag, and eating animals is also all about kind of the regenerative. They're all about partnering with the high welfare farmers. It's the same thing, and so that's it. Is basically in a nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Well, I want to ask one more question, and that's to you guys. So think about what you want to ask us. John Foraker, how is General Mills and beyond General Mills thinking about like bigger companies? Is there a scaled opportunity here? I mean, do you see this?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, we have the business reality of our business is that it's going to about double, and they've owned it for 2 years. By the end of this year, it'll be $400 million, not $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
And we have about it's about a $750 million portfolio now, which is growing very fast. And so we've already had to make huge commitments to converting conventional ground to organic agriculture just to support what we're doing. So 125,000 acres to about 250,000. We made a public commitment to that. And that's not going to be nearly enough. And the way we kind of think about regenerative, just back to that for a second, is like organic is what we've invested in and been passionate about for a long time. And we believe that's an incredibly important thing. And, much like these guys said, we're never going to move away from that. But we do believe that regenerative is like the next elevation up. And it's like, how do we actually reverse and do net positive versus just mitigating the bad? And so I think the scale opportunity is making sure that we can communicate to consumers in a way that they understand and value what this is about and the impact that it has and the connection to climate change and all that. And then develop I always talk about it, Annie's, like, I view Annie's the brand as an economic engine that can pull impact. So we can talk all day about like wanting to convert farms and getting farmers to go through that very painful transition you're talking about, which scares the hell out of most of them. But if they can't see how they're going to get to the other end and feed their family, like Gabe's point where he's like looking at it, and he's figured out that he actually can make more money by doing the right thing. We need to line the systems up and have brands out there that can pull the impact. So like a company like Annie's or General Mills can go to these guys and go, hey, when you get through, we'll help you get through your 3-year period. And by the way, when you get out the other end, we're going to be there. We're going to be buying this crop for a long time with a stable agreement that's going to allow you to thrive and the agricultural and the farm economy to thrive in a holistic system versus the chemical intensive system we have. That to me is like the big win. And if we do that, then I think it's going to unlock, and we're going to have this generational shift in farmers that we talked about going on. Yeah. They're going to be wide open to that. And so I think we have a window of opportunity here, and that's why the big companies need to get behind it or they'll never get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks. Okay. Ryan Honeyman, you want to kick off?
Sure.
Wait.
Do I need a mic or?
I think we can hear you, but here, I'm going to give it to you.
This is for David and John Roulac. You guys mentioned the supply side issue with regenerative and some financial instruments or funding. Can you elaborate on what's needed out there?
Well, the part of the challenge is more and more of the agricultural and ranch lands are going into into institutional investors, insurance companies, and they're basically taking these land assets and leasing them out. The soils are degrading, the water life's degrading, the wildlife's degrading. And they lease out farmland. Do you think the farmers interest? I mean, you think they're gonna spend a lot of money to build up the soil if it's a short-term lease and the insurance company doesn't have a model there? So we really need a different model to acquire land. And it's not just, we're not talking about like a $500 million fund, but we need tens of billions of dollars. I mean, farmland's pretty expensive. So I think, but there's right now the price of farmland is pretty high, and even though the return isn't there for a lot of farmers. So I think there's some need for that. And then also farmers who want to get in, or people who have skills, or ranchers. If you don't own your own land and you want to raise pasture meat, how are you going to get access? It's not so easy. So there's a mismatch there between the market demand and the supply chain. And I think what General Mills is doing as examples. I think that's one of my critique of the food industry is, especially the organic and natural. They haven't been investing in supply chain. They're just saying, well, this is great. Hey, foods, we got to go to organic and pesticides are bad. but where are we educating the farmers? And we're not doing enough of that. So that has to change. That's a weak part. I mean, we lose millions of dollars a year because we can't get enough certified organic hemp. I mean, that's a fact for us. And there's a lot of companies, they just, nature's path, they can't get enough organic grain to meet, it's an issue.
And, yeah, but there's a couple, definitely the dedicated brands really getting involved in with their farmers and their supply chain. But also there's these new, like Farmland LP and Grassland LP, there's these new investment vehicle, or basically mutual fund kind of, real estate deals, like where they're basically like $100 million funds investing in buying up conventional degraded land and then, rebuilding it regeneratively and leasing it at, like making deals with young farmers, undercapitalized farmers, and in a way that's a kind of win-win. And I don't have a whole lot of experience or insight. I just kind of know it in a generic way. But Les Sabo on our team, really knows what's going on.
Okay, we got a few people, so I'm going to ask you. I'm going to move a little quicker from here.
Oh, sure. Thank you for being here. And just to introduce myself, my name is Ling Ling, and I moved from Buffalo to the Bay Area 1 year ago. Yes, okay. Yes, and I also run a meetup group called Food Innovation Circle, where I interview a lot of really mission-driven entrepreneurs from like rebrand back to the roots, Pennsylvania provisions. And I guess my question is, food is such a topic that really touches a lot of other topics like health and wellness or economy or, as you mentioned, climate change. However, when I look at this, election, and I feel like food still is not a national topic comparing to technology or, income tax or job. So I guess, how can we, whoever is working in the food industry or food company leaders, how can we bring that awareness to, to the public and make sure that food can be, something in a national platform comparing to other topics?
Yeah.
Take that on?
Yeah, well, I think Michael Pollan, just actually to this exact point, he just did an amazing article in New York Times Magazine. I think it's October 5th issue. And he just talked about the failure of the Obama administration completely. They had this real opportunity, and Michelle Obama out of the gate had her organic garden, and it's just this really sad story about how the Obama administration just kind of basically got cowed by the ag food interests. But, as disappointing as that is, I think there is a real resurgence or surging of the food and agriculture movement. I talked to Michael, and it's it's disappointing, but if you kind of take a longer view, it's incredible, the trajectory of organic. And, it's really, frustrating here down on the ground. But, if you look 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you can see we're making a lot of progress. And I think movies like Kiss the Ground and we're sponsored. We're involved in 4 different docs. All of a sudden, we're getting hit with 4 different super great docs on organic regenerative ag, and I think there's just going to be a lot more of these vehicles to for the to really educate the public and get people fired up.
So my question is a couple different parts. There's been a massive consolidation.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Michael Frost. I'm with the Full Circle Fund for many years. I'm on the board of Restore the Delta. It's a nonprofit. We work to restore the Bay Delta estuary for future generations. And there's been a massive consolidation of farmland over the past, say, 100 years. Is there any way to bring the populism that's taking place in the country today to maybe make small farms more popular and more prevalent than they have been? And who's going to come and sell this to Wall Street? And how are we going to take on that chemical oil juggernaut that seems to be the elephant in the room? Because the more and more I read about regenerative agriculture, I also read about the Enlist Duo and the new batch of neonics, and it's, it seems to be a dichotomy right now.
That was 3 questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Take one of them.
it's it is an epic battle right now, and if you there's a reason why, at COP21 in Paris, when the French Minister of Agriculture held a press conference and invited, countries from all over the world to talk about regenerative agriculture and their 4-1000 program to, increase the soils, the carbon matter in the soils. England was there, and Germany was there, and Australia was there, and New Zealand, and Italy, and many countries. And guess what country wasn't there? America. I think in India and China, I don't think were there either. Maybe India was there, but it's essentially the petrochemical agriculture companies, the Monsantos and the DuPonts, their power in Washington D.C. is pretty intense, and so they guide policy, they guide media. But I mean, there are cracks in the wall. If you look at the New York Times article this last week, questioning the benefits of GMO agriculture and stuff, it's like stuff that we've been saying for a long time. But I encourage you to read that. So there are some things there, but I mean, it is, and they're funding a lot of, like, there's hundreds of millions of dollars in kind of like kind of black ops, black hat PR blogging. I mean, when I write articles, there's like dozens of posts coming, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you should go out in the country, industrial agriculture, it's not, what do you mean it's toxic, don't you know, you don't know what a chemical is, and they do all that. And then right now they're attacking Dannon. Dannon came out with an initiative. I'm one of the co-founders of GMO Inside, and we had a campaign around dairy and industrial dairy, and we called it Monsanto milk, which didn't endear us to the industrial milk industry too much. But Dannon was like, we don't want to see what happened to Chobani, with the GMO Inside campaign, and so they've announced that they're going non-GMO for their milk supply, and not only non-GMO, but they want like non-GMO plus, to improve soils. It was a big campaign. They spent like a year and a half researching it, and they're being attacked right now by all sorts of farm and ranch groups. But why are they doing that? Because they're concerned about that. So it's a challenge, but we need to move a lot faster. But it's we're literally just poisoning our soils and our air, and there's Roundup in the rainwater. There's Roundup in our blood supply. When there's a young baby born, the young mother is passing Roundup and all sorts of chemicals to the newborn babies. I mean, this is a huge chemical experiment.
That's depressing, John. Can I give something? Can I give something optimistic about that? It is true. Let me give the optimistic part of that. You know what Dannon's response to those guys was? Think of a nice French way of saying stuff it up your ass. They did. They basically responded and they said, guess what? Our consumers want this, whether you like it or not. Our consumers want this, and we're all about doing what's right for our consumers. That, to me, is like the biggest sign of optimism, because you have a big company that has historically lined up with these interests saying, you know what? Consumers have shifted, and they're different, and we need to take care of them. That, to me, is the reason to be optimistic, and in the face of all this horrific stuff. And that, to me, is what it's going to take. And so empower consumers. If you look at the shift in millennial consumers right now, it's unbelievable how much purchasing power is coming. Wait till the next 5 years, and then wait till 5 years after that. Like, brands won't even be recognizable in a store unless they turn and deal with this issue and connect with consumers on this level here in the U.S. and globally, really.
Yeah. And I just want to give a shout out to Gary. Like, we've had our differences, of late over the end game on things, whatever. But obviously, it's Stonyfield being wholly owned by Danone. I mean, he's obviously having influence on the inside there. Just like hopefully Annie's will or is on General Mills. Just bringing these. So it's an inside outside game. So
yeah, it is. It's a complex world we live in. It used to be easy with villains and good guys. It's hard now.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And we're going to be here for a little while if you guys have questions afterwards. We'll hang out.
Hi, I'm Josh Tickle. I'm working in software ag tech, most recently aerial imagery for crop health. My question is, I understand most of the crop land, majority of crop land in America is large farms, 10,000 to 100,000 acres or so. What will it take for the giant farms to convert to regenerative? And what are the biggest barriers there?
Well, my single simplest answer is they got to figure out how they make money doing it, and how it's just how If they look at it and they can understand how they can make money and have it work in a long-term system, I think you'll get people converting like crazy. But it's very easy to say that. It's very hard to do it because you have all these challenges that have already been outlined about transition periods and stable demand and principal counterparties on the other side. It's complex, but I think that's the simplest answer.
The other simple step is planting cover crops. and if we really wanted to change agriculture in America and sequester carbon, if we change the farm bill where we said a certain percentage of the subsidy for farmers for these major crops, if we just said you get 50% for what you're doing now, and if you want the other 50%, you have to do either check the box, cover crop, hedgerows, certain things like that. And that would make the biggest change. I mean, if American farmers in the Midwest and the South planted a cover crop, that would do more than doubling organic acres next year. And more farmers are starting to do that.
And that's what Gabe. That's Gabe's point. Like just when he's doing his pasture cropping, he's generating income with grazing, and and just ecologically, it's just crazy. I mean, like that conversion rate of ruminant plant protein to animals. Eating grain that ruminants aren't involved to eat. I mean, it's not only unethical and an animal welfare issue, but it's just ridiculous. Like they could be eating grass on that same land that's growing the corn and regenerating the soil instead of stripping the carbon. It's just, it's just the incentives and the economic, everything's like messed up with our subsidy schemes and everything else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Having just come back from Nebraska on a trip. Wow, it is one dismal place. It's like they're subsidizing this. But the good news was there was this small renegade group sneaking non-GMO corn into the GMO corn supply. I thought that was so cool. It's like another example. And the farmers were noticing and saying, wow, actually, my land kind of looks better over here. So there's lots of bright spots. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. We are going to hang out. There's actually food and drink outside, so this is not this is the formal closing. But I know a lot of you still have questions we didn't get to, so please, hopefully you guys can hang out for a little bit because I know lots of folks have questions. And I want to thank the three of you not only for being here, but especially for everything you're doing because it's really inspiring. And